There's an old saying, give credit where credit's due. Right? If someone accomplishes something or does something right, even if you don't like that individual, you still recognize them and say, hey, you done a good job. You got the job done.
That's right.
You know, a lot of times around us, we see things happen in this world, and the individual responsible for it never gets credit for it. Right? We see it in politics all the time. Politicians stand up and christen new buildings or whatever, and they take credit for something that hundreds of other people worked hard towards, but they get the credit for it because they signed the bill in the legislation or whatever it is. Well, today we're going to talk about the church, and the Apostle Paul says that in the church there's one person who should always get the credit.
That's right. Hi, I'm Shauna, and this is my husband Pete with Collique Family Discipleship. We are ordained ministers with the Church of God, and what we do is just take to social media and ask you to come into our home and do Bible study with us. We've done Bible study for years, and right now we're trying to disciple our family by just going through the letters that Paul wrote in chronological order. So you get to journey along with us. We're actually going to talk about 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 17 and 18.
There's a typo on the paper. That was my fault.
That's totally him.
Don't blame her. It was me.
It's okay.
Because I typed the notes out.
It's okay. But then in 17 and 18 say, but let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends.
So I mentioned earlier, a lot of times people get credit for stuff that actually have nothing to do with it. I work for an organization that is publicly traded, and that a lot of times the sweat of men's brow who are underground working in the coal mines, the CEO is the one that gets the credit for it, right? He's going to get the big bonus. The shareholders are going to say, let's give the CEO their $1 million bonus for making us money. When in actuality, someone else has worked really hard to make sure that he gets that bonus. They deserve the credit, right? But they don't always get the credit. And this happens naturally daily. But it should never happen in the church. It should never happen spiritually. The one who deserves credit should always get the credit. And Jesus deserves the credit.
Absolutely. I remember growing up that there were a lot of things that I seen my dad accomplish and get to carry out and do. And not until Pete and I entered into ministry did I understand that he would have not been able to do all that he did without my mom. He wouldn't have been able to do the youth ministry. He wouldn't have been able to drive the bus. Because he was enabled because God had given him the ability, but because God had given him a helpmate, someone that was willing to do ministry with him. And a lot of times we'll find that behind the scenes, a minister will have a good support group, a good family who is always encouraging them and helping them along.
Right. The Apostle Paul actually says, that if you're going to boast about anything that happens in the church, you should be boasting on the Lord. Mm-hmm. And that he continues on to say that anyone who boasts of themselves is not worthy of an honor. Instead, they are to commend the Lord for their work. So if you know an individual, a minister or someone, and they're constantly boasting upon themselves, then that individual needs to check themselves, right?
That's true.
Because God should be getting the glory. A lot in the modern churches like to publicize their statistics like it's ESPN or something, like a little thing going across the bottom of the screen. We had this many in church this morning, this many baptisms, this many salvations, this much offering this morning, right? And they like to publicize all those things because they want the world to look at it and say, that church is successful. That minister is a great leader. That congregation is doing what it needs to do. But a lot of times what they're doing is just building themselves up instead of building the church up. And what we always want to do is make sure that we're building up Jesus Christ, right? Because the Word of God says if we lift Him high, then all men will be drawn unto Him.
Don't get us wrong. It is really good to brag about what God is doing within a congregation or a community of believers. It is so wonderful. But sometimes we lose focus on what we're really trying to talk about. Are we trying to draw people into our temple to build that up instead of into God's kingdom to build that up? And that is a very deep subject that we don't even have time to start to discuss today. But if we always give God glory, we will never go wrong with that.
Right. John 3:30, John the Baptist says something that's very profound about his ministry. He says, I must decrease so that Christ can increase. And basically, that's what we must do. We've got to get ourselves out of the way so Jesus can go to the forefront. And we have to decrease so that he can increase. The more we step back and let him have the limelight, the more success we're going to see in ministry, the more we're going to see individuals led to him, the more we're going to see this world changed, because that's where it belongs. He belongs in the forefront.
You know, currently we're expecting, I am due in October, and we're going to have a little girl. And I have found that every time that I get pregnant, that I begin to put that child first. You know, the things that I may have enjoyed, or even the activities that I did, I've got to bring myself back so that my child will be successful, so that their life will be healthy, so that they can do what they are called to do, or even, you know, come into this world in a proper way. So many times, sometimes we just have to do what is right, take a back seat, and just allow God to birth something in us and to use us in a way in order to bring forth about his righteousness and glorification of his kingdom.
Right. So going forward, every day we want to encourage you to encounter God, to exalt God, to edify yourself by reading the Word, and we want you to engage this world for Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. So until next time, may God richly bless you.